Hello everyone, I'm Megha Chaturvedi and I'm thrilled to welcome you back to another episode of Belong to the Future. This podcast is all about breaking down the power of climate education and making it accessible to everyone. Every fortnight, I have the privilege of speaking to some inspiring leaders and change makers from various walks of life to discuss how climate education can truly shape the future for the next generation. You might be wondering why focus on education? Well, I stumbled upon a powerful insight from Room to Read, an organization striving for a world free from illiteracy and gender inequality. They say, and I quote, many world problems can be addressed through one solution, education, and I unquote. Think about it. Knowing how to read empowers people to be safer, healthier, and more self sufficient. Yet over 173 million people around the globe can't read. That's more than double the population of the United States, and two-thirds of them are women and girls. Room to Read is tackling this by transforming schools in historically low income communities at crucial stages of child's education. I couldn't have said it better myself, and today I'm incredibly excited to introduce our guest, Ms. Poornima, the country director of Room to Read in India. With over 2 decades of experience, Poonam is a fierce advocate for children's rights and has dedicated her career to making a positive impact in their lives. Her commitment to gender equality and women's rights have been pivotal in promoting life skills education for girls through Room to Read's initiatives. In recognition of her tireless efforts, she is honored with the title of the Phenomenal She in 2019 by the Indian National Bar Association, and I cannot beg to differ how amazing and instrumental Poonima is with her perspectives and her actions in real life. Join me as we dive into this important conversation. Poonima, thank you for taking out time for this conversation today. I'm sure many listeners will benefit a great deal and learn a great deal from your experience, not just as the country director at Room to Read, but also giving you a deep understanding of human behavior, emotional intelligence, and L&D programs. So thank you once again for coming on our podcast and episode.
Thank you so much, Mega, for having me here. It's my privilege to be there.
Purnima, before we dive right into our question and answer segment, I will request you to give us an introduction about Room to Read and the mission of the organization because it's something that perhaps I have read about and felt it's such an important platform, and the work that the team is doing is so pertinent in the times that we are in today. But I would want the listeners to hear from you about what the organization is.
Room to Read is a global nonprofit focused on improving literacy and gender equality in education. And, our mission is to transform lives through education, empowering children to realize their full potential and contribute to a more equitable, literate world. And we started our operations in 2000 and we work in 23 countries. And India is one of the largest operations for us as an organization. We largely have two programs. Our literacy program focuses on enhancing reading skills. We establish libraries, do teachers training, and provide locally published books. And another important program that we work on is our girls' education program. It ensures that girls complete secondary schools and develop essential life skills. One thing which is very interesting, and I think it's important for the listeners to know that in addition to our core program, Room to Read integrates climate justice into its girls' education program, wherein we are empowering girls to become leaders in addressing climate change. Through a life skills curriculum, girls are taught critical thinking, environmental awareness, and sustainable practices, which actually enables them to make informed decisions and advocates for climate justice.
Very interesting, and I think the part, and I was reading the report of the UNGA that was recently concluded, and it says less than 10% of the leaders at the conference were women. So I think this is such a relevant thing to do, that we are empowering girls and women of tomorrow to sort of say you are ready to become a leader and an important voice in this space. So this is very, very interesting, Purnima. While I'll come back to this later, I understand that Room to Read really focuses on and is community engagement is a very important element of how how you function. From the point of view of education for climate change and awareness and action, how do you think community engagement can make a difference?
Well, community engagement is pivotal in driving education for climate change awareness and action. At Room to Read, we believe involving the communities create a collective responsibility for education and sustainability. By integrating climate awareness into our programs and working closely with the families, local leaders in the schools, we can actually influence attitude and behavior at the grassroots level. And the community members serve as role models and advocates. They reinforce the importance of education and sustainable practices. Their involvement ensures that climate justice education is not just limited to the classroom, but become part of the daily life. Fostering a long-term environmental stewardship and empowering young people, especially girls, to act. Through shared learning and local initiatives, communities can amplify climate action, creating ripple effects that benefit both the environment and the future generations.
Interesting. And few words, Poornima, that you speak right now and come to me is shared learning, how families and local community members are ambassadors for lifelong attitudinal and behavior change. Are there any examples that you would want to share with me around how has community engagement changed or shifted the needle and you've seen that happening?
See, what happens is that when communities start to participate and
Mm-hmm.
really become part of making a social change, the behavior change happens. We all know that when we are talking about climate justice, climate change, it's extremely important. The first step is to have an awareness. The second is a changed behavior. And of course, then we know it leads to sustainable practices. So there are a lot of examples and a lot of case studies that we have wherein when community kind of got involved and when the community really gave a ecosystem to a child to be able to have more sustainable practices, that's when the social change was more sustainable and it was not temporary to an extent when a non-profit is just operating and having their own programs.
Very interesting, Poonam. And I think a lot of conversations that I've had previously on the podcast and even otherwise, I see a lot of families and parents, especially, wanting to understand what can they do to have their children become more aware and engaged in this conversation. And I think what you've said is the need of the hour. And as we move on, Punima, in fact, I attended the virtual launch of the World Bank's report. One of the points that came highlighted during that panel discussion during the launch was that while climate education, it seems like a big word and it seems like a towering goal that we have to achieve, the fundamental of all of this is basic literacy, right? Until and unless children are able to read and comprehend and write, they'll not be able to participate in the whole scheme of climate education. I'll quote a very pertinent point that, in fact, I think at the Room to Reads, one of the literature that you had was that 70% of children in historically low to middle income communities cannot read and understand a simple text by the age of 10, and that's very alarming actually. And it got me thinking that until unless somebody starts with the basic literacy, how can they participate in the whole climate education spectrum? Given the vision of Room to Read, I would want to know your thoughts about this, that how literacy starting from the basics is so justified and so necessary.
So, you mentioned the World Bank's report and also the literature that you read of Room to Read. Both of this actually underscores a critical truth, which is that basic literacy is foundational not only for academic success, but also for informed decision making in every aspect of life, including the climate action. By focusing on foundation literacy through our program, we are setting the groundwork for children to understand broader issues and develop the skills needed to engage with global challenges. And as we strengthen basic literacy, we simultaneously create the potential for climate education to be impactful, enabling children to grow into informed citizens who can contribute meaningfully to a sustainable future.
Rightfully stated, Poornima, and I think teachers, and it's a no-brainer that they are the central figures of laying the land for the foundation literacy, right? And once again, I think I'll go back to some of the literature that I was reading. It said skilled teachers give children a solid start. Very simple but so profound. I want you to share in detail about this pillar and how is room to read seeing a gap in how well teachers are equipped to be a participant in the scheme of things of foundational literacy that is leading to climate education, so on and so forth.
I fully agree that skilled teachers are the cornerstones of a quality education. And our approach at Room to Reach emphasizes teachers' training as a critical pillar of our literacy program because, well equipped teachers are essential for laying the foundation of children's learning. Skilled teachers are not only, they're not there only to teach child
Hmm.
to read and write,
Hmm.
but they also nurture critical thinking, curiosity, and the ability to engage with complex topics like climate change or other social issues. But we have a global shortage of trained teachers.
Yes.
2.4 million more teachers are required by 2030. This is indeed a challenge, and in some cases, countries are forced to compromise on the teacher quality to meet immediate demand. So, in this entire scheme of things, as an organization, we see a gap in teachers' preparedness,
Hmm.
especially in underserved areas. Many teachers are not equipped with the skills, tools, or the ongoing support, the mentoring that they need to succeed in the classroom. And we address these gaps through our in depth teacher training and mentoring program, providing educators with effective teaching techniques, classroom management strategies, and ongoing professional development. And if I talk more to address this issue at a broader level, at a policy level,
Hmm.
changes are needed crucially. In fact, let's talk about our Indian setup. The governments must prioritize teachers' training and professional development, though now it is being prioritized through the national education policy. But we just need to really look at it that if we need customized professional development for the teachers, because every teacher has different context that
Hmm.
they are operating in. So to make it very customized, to make it very tailor made for the teachers.
I'm glad that you brought national education policy. Punmi, just a follow up question on that. When we talk about teacher training, I also understand that when teachers are catering to not just one set of age group, right? We start like how we spoke about foundational learning is where we start from primary education till the time a student is ready to sort of go out in the world and make a career choice. And if he or she has an understanding of climate change and what is that he can do and what are his or her options to participate in that, and hence teachers understanding should also be varied, right? Like, from somebody who's teaching, like I said, K-12 to about an 8th or ninth grade student. How do you think that can be handled? Do you think there is a curriculum that's required for different teachers at different levels so that they are well equipped to speak to the students accordingly?
When we talk about teachers as a key change makers, and we do say that teachers are the key change makers for us. See, it is very important that, let's say, a climate change or a climate curriculum that you would provide for a state like Uttarakhand
Hmm.
would be very different from Jharkhand's context. And
Yes.
I'm just trying to give you an example from our Indian landscape.
Yes.
What we need to do is actually every regional context is different. While there are global thematic areas that we need to kind of focus on, but largely, if you look at the teacher and the child relationship here, at the very beginning, at a primary education level, what we are trying to do is that, first of all, a teacher need to be aware that social issues actually exist. First of all, they need to have a consensus of it.
Yeah.
And then to be able to create that awareness at a very young age in children to instill a behavior change for a lifelong learner. So I believe that giving contextualized training and giving contextualized capacities and mentoring to the teacher to be able to deal with different climate education which can be deeply integrated into our curriculum, that's something that we'll have to do. We'll have to introduce climate friendly habits, awareness. So those are the things that we will have to kind of facilitate for our teachers to be able to then take it to the next level. So, for example, if you look at it, climate education is not yet deeply integrated into our national curriculum,
Yeah.
right? So, if we have to lay the foundation, we have to even get that corrected at a policy level first.
Yes. Sort of said this out aloud that India, given it's just not one country, it's the land of many countries, in one country. And given every state had such regional and language nuances, I think education again then will have to be molded accordingly so that people grasp it and adapt it easily, right? It doesn't seem very alien to them. So I
Yeah.
think that that's something the policymakers can perhaps at state level look at from the education point of view. As I move forward, Purnima, I'm reminded of, my childhood when most of my beyond classroom education and learning came from reading books, right? And so many of my scientific or otherwise moral, social learnings came from books that my elder brothers or my parents handed over to me. With so many children's author that, such as Bijal Vachrajani, she's writing about climate in her work for young children. How do you think this movement can influence children's thought process? Because there are so many children who start reading books before even they start, going through educational textbooks. How do you think this can sort of help the cause that we're speaking about?
So, age appropriate children's literature is a key component of the work that we do. And books have an extraordinary ability to shape the way children see the world. And, authors like Bijalji, who are writing about climate change for young readers, are playing a crucial role in shaping how children think about the environment. And we believe that storytelling is a powerful tool for both education and inspiration. I'm sure you would agree, given you also mentioned that how your childhood still has an impression on you.
Very
So,
much.
when children engage with stories that touch an important issue like climate change, they not only gain knowledge but also develop empathy, critical thinking, and a sense of responsibility. And if you are from, northern India, I'll also cite one of the examples from few previous years,
Mm-hmm.
and it has stayed with me. That example has stayed with me because my children would come back and tell me that there was a time when during the Diwali, children were taught that don't burn the crackers. And I remember my children coming back and telling. And what happened is that in the school, the way it was kind of the story was narrated or the books that the children read, they actually read that how the crackers could create pollution, how is it harmful for the pets or the birds, and why they should not be burning the cracker because it's harmful for the environment as a whole.
Hmm.
So, if you look at it, and again, as I'm saying, I'm from the northern part of the India, especially Delhi NCR,
Mm-hmm.
wherein during Diwali you have this
Yes.
huge big issue around pollution around Diwali. So that change, if you would remember in previous years, has changed to a behavioral change in children.
Yeah.
Children are more conscious about it. And this growing movement of authors addressing this climate issue in children's literature can deeply influence young minds. By weaving environmental themes into relatable stories, these books make complex topics accessible and they engage children, sparking curiosity, encouraging them to think about their role in protecting the planet. Then that's very, very important. When a child starts thinking like that, through characters and narratives, children can explore the impact of climate change and feel empowered to act, whether by making a small change in their own lives or by advocating for larger environmental solutions. So, we globally have so many young environmental activists also, and they're
Yes.
like young kids. So, That's the power of narrating right stories to children at the right age.
Yeah, very rightly said. Because I, in fact, was speaking to somebody who said that now there is a possibility and potential of YouTube creators who will, in their own way of animation or video creation, will talk about how climate is changing and how children can sort of, be exposed to that idea not just as a boring educational diktat that's coming from a teacher or a book, but because you have to engage them in a manner that is fit for them to learn and be excited about. Literature, entertainment, art has such an important role to play how the behavior change happens, like you rightly said, right? So very, very interesting. Purnima, before we conclude, anything that you would want to leave the listeners with, given the vast variety of initiatives and programs that you're part of, anything around climate education and how we can actually start making those tangible changes in our daily lives, or from policy perspective that that can help the cause.
Change starts from me. So I think the message that I want to leave the listeners with is that it's important that one needs to be the change they want to see in the world. So one is the biggest advocate for the cause they want to stand for. So it's important that we understand that these are the issues that are just not concerning us, but our future generations. And to me, I'm a strong believer of education because education is an intersection of every social cause. And we
Yes.
can deal with any crisis through education, through awareness, because world change starts with educated children. So that's the message that I like to leave the listeners with. It takes a village to raise a child, and we are all part of this village. We are all the stakeholders, the authors, you as the podcast moderator, me as a speaker, the listeners. We all have a role to play, and we need to be really making sure that we are playing our role right.
I really love this conversation because some of the things that you said, especially about the literatures, the way you have sort of concluded saying are the sort of the mirror that, especially the young children look at, observe, and, imbibe in their daily behavior, right? So if we start, behaving in a certain manner, reacting towards climate change as a issue very responsibly, I think that will sort of seep down to how they really would want to participate in this. And I think I had a lovely conversation, and I would urge the readers to go through the Read to Room to Read initiative and the organization, the work that you guys are doing, because it is everybody to start reading, and especially the work that you're doing around the girl children, and make sure that there are leaders from that section of the population. Very pertinent, very, very relevant. So once again, thank you, Poornima. It was lovely chatting with you, and thank you for your time once again.
Thank you so much.